mountain to the ocean, from the windward to the leeward side. On the island, we do it island style.
Hello and welcome back, Big Island. You're watching Rise Above Hawaii, which is a 30-minute talk star in health, and we are so excited here to have Dr. Carol Plummer, who is a colleague of mine. We go back about 10 years.
12.
12 years when we first met. We were charged with getting the Department of Education back on track.
Felix consent.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And now, and since then, you've been doing, you went off and you've done other things, yeah?
Well, yeah, I was a professor at LSU, and then I got hired at University of Hawaii School of Social Work. So I'm working with them and also Consuelo Foundation the last 2 years.
Awesome. So this is kind of like a catch-up, you know?
Yeah.
So this is cool. It's good to know that you're doing good work. I'm glad to have you on my show.
Thank you.
What I found that Carol was doing was she was working on a specific project island-wide, and it's basically comes out of the question, and how are the children?
Right.
So tell us a little bit
Hence
about...
my book, and how are the children?
It's famous. She even got a book here, you guys. You've got famous people on this show. You're lucky.
Actually, the book is a compilation of the research that we completed.
Okay.
2 years ago when I got hired at University of Hawaii, it was an unusual position because it was funded by Consuelo Foundation.
Okay.
And Consuelo Foundation was started basically by a wealthy woman in the Philippines who gave her fortune to start this foundation. So we give about 3/4 of our money to the Philippines, 1/4 here to Hawaii. So they hired me basically to do research on child abuse and neglect here in Hawaii.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And that's a tough subject, folks. Child abuse and neglect.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell us a little bit how do you start a project like that? Do you have to contact folks?
Well, yeah. First thing we had to do, because here I am, I'm coming from Louisiana. And do you know?
Are you born and raised?
No, I'm not. Oh. No, I'm from the Midwest.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I come here and they say you're going to do research on child abuse and neglect, which you know is kind of a tricky topic.
Yeah,
and they want me to focus on applied research, so something that will make a difference, not just like figures and facts, and also focus on the Native Hawaiian community. So I'm like, I have to get my friend Chemo and some other people who can advise me. And so we got the advisory committee and decided to do a focus group study first. And that's mostly just looking at what do kupuna have to say and what do service providers say about the general question, and how are the children. And it's not just island-wide, it's all the islands.
That's right.
So we went to all the islands.
We went to all the islands, man.
Yeah.
And when you called me for this project, this is good because this is a catch up on how the project has moved since then.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great idea. Here comes Carol and she says, we should get folks together, the kupuna, the elders, the community advocates together, who also provide services, but not just provide services. People who kind of are at the grassroots level, who can give us real honest, clear feedback on the question, and how are the children. And that's exactly what we did. We met with about 15 individuals, mostly women, kupunas, talking story here, and it was basically around children.
Right.
And we didn't ask them the question about, so how many kids do you think are neglected? How many get abused? That was kind of an open-ended question.
Yeah, and how are the children? So
Smart.
They could say positive things, they could say negative things, they could say their concerns, and we got a lot of good input.
That's great.
Yeah.
So did you also talk about, which is a tough subject, folks, about sex abuse, child sex abuse?
We did. We didn't bring it up. Okay. Usually it was either kupuna or service providers that brought it up themselves. And actually we were pretty surprised because we heard stories of kupuna themselves who'd been through it in the past, and many of them had kept that story for decades before they were able to talk about it. Yeah.
Wow. So this project also became therapeutic for some older adults?
I hope so. Yeah.
So how prevalent is that issue of sex abuse? I mean, is it more so than we think, or?
Well, sometimes people, since I did the study here in Hawaii, they ask me, like, how much does it happen here? But the hardest thing, of course, is that most people don't talk about it. So if you look at the figures, it doesn't really reflect what's going on. So, for example, some of the kupuna that I've spoken with, they've said, I didn't come forward to talk about the abuse until my offender was dead. So they're in their 60s and 70s before they're even talking about what happened to them. So we know that it happens a lot. In fact, the national statistics are about 1 out of 4 girls before they turn age 18, and about 1 out of 6 or 7 boys. So it's a lot.
And,
Yeah.
and it really messes. I think it messes kids up in
Yeah.
terms of how they see the world, but not so much so that they cannot recover.
That's
I
true.
remember talking to you off the air and how you said if there's a boundary violation, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
it happens earlier. Like what are some of what makes it a harder recovery than a
Good question. I think the hardest is the relationship. So if you're really close to the person, like it's your parent or somebody really close to you, you've got that betrayal thing going on, you know? If it is very violent, then that will be more severity often. And interestingly, I found that some of the kids that have had the worst trouble with sexual abuse are the young teens, because they already sort of know it's wrong. They kind of blame themselves. Whereas if you give me a preschooler that's been sexually abused, they probably don't blame themselves.
Oh.
You know?
So the
They're like,
recovery-
that was a bad guy. They did a bad thing. And so, yeah, recovery is easier with the younger ones sometimes.
Oh, so it's like you've been doing this all your life.
Yeah,
A
5 or
therapist?
10 years, I said. Yeah.
How long have you been a therapist?
Well, actually, since about the late 70s, so I've been around a while.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, we're so lucky to have folks like you, because I think this is a field that not everybody can get into.
Yeah.
I'm a psychologist. That would be a tough field to work
Yeah.
with kids who've been violated like that.
Yeah.
And every day. I mean, so we need folks like you.
Mm-hmm.
And so sex abuse is part of the child abuse spectrum,
Right.
if you will. But there's also physical abuse.
Yep. Neglect.
And neglect.
Mm-hmm.
And now, in terms of the physical abuse, is it also true that it depends on the relationship in terms of how the recovery?
Yeah, I actually sometimes I'll say to people, my father used a belt on me. Not saying it's a great thing to do, but
my father used a belt on me too.
but my father loved me. My father thought I could do anything. He didn't bring it out because he was drinking. It had to do with a problem. So I think there are many better ways to deal with disciplining children,
Sure.
but my dad didn't know any better, and he loved me.
Yeah.
So the context is really important.
context.
Of course, I didn't get any broken bones either. It was,
Yeah.
it was more appropriate in terms of severity. So
I see.
that's important.
So that's important. So folks, context matters.
Yep.
And when we say context, it's what are the circumstances that led up to the belting?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
It's not just he was drunk, and so then, because if that happens, then life becomes unpredictable for a kid.
Yes,
And
yeah.
that's where the emotional issues
Yeah.
come out when
Yeah.
you're uncertain of this stuff, and you don't.
Right, right.
There's trust issues, and you feel insecure, and you get messed up that way.
Yeah.
I think.
And if violence is just, so frequent that's, you
Yeah.
flinch every time somebody comes near you, that's a very different thing from, that you really got your mom upset and she's been waiting all day to tell your dad, at least you did something wrong. Yeah.
You're prepared for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I used to joke. One time I came home late, and my dad's on the porch waiting for me like that, and I remember getting out of the car, and I was like, wow, he actually stayed up. And my body just started taking a limp. I just started limping for some reason. I don't know, thinking that he might take pity on me, because I knew it was coming.
Did it work?
It worked.
Oh.
What happened? Are you okay, son? Oh yeah. I don't know. I think I sprained my ankle. Well, you was late. Oh, sorry, Dad.
Because of that sprained ankle, yeah.
So the little limp,
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your findings or the process.
Yeah, well, I can tell you both. I love this work, and the most important part of it was listening to people and gathering their stories. And so I really feel like I was able to collect a lot of really powerful quotes from people around all the islands. Little things like hurt children, right?
Yeah.
So, you just, something sticks with you and you realize there's a lot of wisdom out there
Yeah.
amongst the kupuna and also service providers who've worked with our families a long time. That was a real privilege to be able to listen to the stories. The second thing that I wanted to emphasize, though, is that I really wanted to take child abuse out of the domain of just looking at individuals, like if that kid just behaved themselves, or if that parent just had a parenting class, and even outside of the family bubble, and say, wait a minute, child abuse and neglect, that happens in the context of a community and a society. So what should we be doing?
Yeah.
You know, not just that bad parent or that bad kid, but all of us.
Messed up family.
Yeah,
We tend to be blaming like that.
exactly.
Yeah. So wow. So you really took it to a different level. You asked the question, what are we doing as a community?
Yeah.
You know, how are we as a community promoting, hindering, you know, or how do we serve as a protective factor or a risk factor? How are we as the community?
Yeah. We have to own the problem as a community. If we don't, we just keep like knocking on the door of social service agencies and saying, hey, there's a problem, can you come fix it? And really, it's a problem that we all share, and because so much of this is hidden, we all have got to step up and speak up and do something. You know, just a little thing. One thing I found from this study is that most people said we need to put a lot more emphasis on prevention. We can't just keep waiting for treatment, right?
Okay.
We got to like put our money where our mouth is and try to make things healthier for families and better for children. So I thought that was great. And another thing that actually surprised me about the study is how much people said we've got to focus on teens and preteens, because they said, you know, if you think about it, grown-ups start kind of backing off of kids when they hit the teen years. Like, you know, they're grown, they'll figure it out.
Done.
Yeah,
Almost.
right, right. But really, you know, that's when they're most at risk for dating violence, drugs, you know, relating to the wrong peer group, all kinds of things you can get into trouble. Well, early pregnancies, yeah.
Wow.
So it's better if we move into teens rather than back off. Even though they might act like they want us to back off, they need us.
Wow.
Yeah.
So prevention is important.
Yeah.
For this issue. And so how does prevention look like?
Well, prevention has many faces, you know. It's not like there's one thing that's prevention. I think that all of us need to think about what we can do to strengthen both children and families and relationships and communities. All of those things are protective factors.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah, because there's not one magic bullet that can prevent child abuse and neglect.
No.
But I know when families feel connected, because there's community events or activities that helps them to be connected.
Yeah.
Like I'm a coach, I coach sports, and my sports are actually, one parent came up to me and said, thank you for, you know, my son is, I mean, that's all he does outside of school, and you provide us as a family an opportunity to come and watch him.
Yeah.
You know, you give us an excuse to get out of the house, you give us like an excuse to connect, and so that's a protective factor.
Well, and also to honor that particular child. They're important enough for the family to come out and applaud, and so those are really great things.
And another thing I like how you mentioned about, you know, that this is not just a family problem, or, you know, it's a community, maybe even if it's a political problem too, because I think I've learned that when communities feel disconnected, or when they feel connected, and so the question is, how does communities feel connected? I read some research, this might be trivial, but check this out. When they found in communities that there's sidewalks, and that there's where actually families can go on family walks, and they build community. And I was like, how did they do that? Well, they went on, they said, well, if you're walking past another family, then you say, hey, how's it? And they'll say, how's it? But when you go next week and you walk again, you say, hey, how's it? You say, how's it? And they say, oh, how much kids do you have? Oh, I have 7. How much do you have? 6. Oh, what's 13? All of a sudden, you start building community. Right. And then your neighbors are not just your neighbors anymore. They're like auntie. Uncle lives there, you know, and you can play with. So and I think as communities get connected, because I think child abuse can happen in isolation.
That's true. That's true. That's one of the things that came out in the study too, is that people were saying like being connected is a protective factor. So if you are, really for anything. People that do drugs, people that commit crimes, they're more likely to be isolated. People that commit suicide, they feel alone. So if we can embrace those people, and actually even people like who've been to prison and they're coming back home, to figure out how do we bring them back into our human community, not keep them
away.
Yeah, because they're going to come home eventually.
Yeah,
Figure out.
We had a whole interview on that with our reintegration program.
Oh, yeah?
How do we reintegrate our inmates
Mhm.
back into the
Yeah,
community?
yeah.
Yeah, so if we go along with, I don't know, this just occurred to me.
Sure.
Okay? Like this hypothesis that abuse happens in isolation, then the intervention for that is to be interconnected.
Yep.
I remember one time when I was scolding my youngster, kind of like aggressively. I'm making a mean face, and my mother-in-law and my kind of like she was the protective factor. She was, oh, come, and then I saw how
Yep.
caring she was, and I felt bad for making the mean face and
Yeah.
all. And then I have a sister who sometimes will say, hey, you're being too hard on your kids.
Yep.
So I always wondered, what if you don't have an older sister or
A barometer.
Yeah, like
that-
somebody to keep you in check.
Yeah.
I could be easily an abusive, neglected parent, I think, if I don't have
Yeah.
somebody to keep me in check.
Right. Right. And being willing to
Yeah.
sort of do your parenting out in the open rather than behind locked doors
Yeah.
makes a big difference.
So the idea that it takes a community to solve this problem, that's the examples that from even a simple
Yeah.
sidewalk to build communities, from my older sister, from a mother-in-law,
True.
that kind
Yeah.
of connections help protect children,
That's right.
I think.
The other thing we found, I was telling you about how important it was to get focused on the preteens and the teens.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody gets the luck of the draw and gets a great parent or great parents,
That's true.
right?
That's true.
So if we as adults see kids that are disconnected and don't have anybody, whether they're, like maybe our kid's friend or, somebody at the church, but they don't really look like they're fitting in, bring them into the fold. We all can parent these kids because really, the research shows again, it only takes one or two concerned, positive role model to turn somebody around, somebody who cares. It doesn't have to be their parents. So
That's true. And parents, believe me, I'm a parent. I'm always looking for surrogate parents. Okay,
sign up here.
Because I can say things forever. But if an auntie or an uncle or
Right.
a friend or a coach can say the same thing in a different way, my kids will listen. So because I know that's true, I'm the Mr. Advice Giver at my practices.
All right.
Because I'm known as a parent out there that's inside the saying, Coach Kimo, please tell my kid what I want to tell them.
There you go.
In your own way.
Right, because they'll listen to you and not the parent. It's one of the downsides of being a parent sometimes. Yep.
So, wow, this is really good work. And so, so there's a book that has come out of this, you folks. It's How Old Are the Children, and this is, actually Carol's been giving it out for free for service providers, those folks who provide services to our children. And it has a compelling quotes, especially, and advice. And I really like that quote, hurt children.
Yeah.
That
cycle of
that cycle.
what you learn.
If you don't stop that cycle, it's just going to continue. So,
A couple other things I wanted to add that also came out strongly from Kapuna in particular is the importance of being spiritually based and giving some grounding to our kids. Worried about the kids not being as respectful as Pono as they would like to see. So that came out strong.
wow. So giving kids a spiritual base, and it can be church related or can be culture related.
Yep. Yep.
But something that gives them the fundamental grounding
Yeah.
of having values.
Yes.
Yeah.
And being a part of a community.
Yeah.
Having responsibility for others, not just going
Yeah.
for what you want.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. And have you seen that? Has there been any uniqueness, like with Big Island versus Oahu versus Molokai versus Lanai versus Maui? Or
Yes,
the
each
themes?
one is different. Actually, I did a separate report for each site, and then I did a statewide report too, where I pulled together everything from everybody. Clearly, neighbor island communities feel like they get less,
That's true.
that
But
money is taken away more quickly, that services aren't as accessible. And actually, Molokai and Lanai in particular, they feel like they don't have a lot of community-based services, and that's tough, But I think as we consider that it doesn't just have to be agencies, but it can be community-based, involving churches, service groups, whatever, sewing circles, quilting groups, whatever. It doesn't have to be just,
That's
official people
That's true.
solving.
Sometimes it's the unofficial people that
Make the difference.
the good helpers. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
Let me think what else. There were some areas that were more concerned about drugs, although drugs seems to be a big issue across all of the islands. Teen pregnancy, a very big issue. And actually, it was interesting. Some people feel as though their parents and grandparents even pressure them to having kids early, like even before they're out of high school. So we maybe need to think about that. There are other ways to succeed without producing a baby,
That's true. I was just hinting to Rosie over there. Where's all the grandchildren? Maybe it's a value that has a double-edged sword. The value of ohana.
Well, it can interrupt your opportunity to get a good education and do some other things. So you got to think about that, Lots of kupuna being overwhelmed by having to raise their grandchildren. In fact, one story of a woman who had 8 children. She was in her 80s, and she was raising grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Wow. And she said, it's just too much. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, it would be too much for me, It's like, so we have to think about how do we support our kupuna and not just dump on them in that way.
True. That is true. We don't usually think about that.
Yeah.
Because you're right, because CPS, when they get involved, if there's a child abuse or neglect, they go to the families first.
Yeah, sure.
And the kupuna, all the kids they're like the prime, foster parent, if you will.
Right.
Ready to go, but and they don't know how to say no.
Yeah.
So they say yes.
Well, they care about the grandkids, of course, but they said to me, some folks say it's cultural, but they said, not really, not this way, because it used to be within the context of a strong ohana. Yeah. So maybe I've got the kids, but I'm not like overwhelmed all by myself. It's in a context.
In the context of an ohana,
a little different.
Yeah, in this way, they just got the kids.
That's right.
Got no other help.
Right.
Wow. What would we do without grandparents, though? Boy. They say God couldn't be everywhere. That's why he created grandparents.
That's right.
Thank you so much, grandparents.
That's good.
But you guys need help too, so go take a break every once in a while. And we can help give them a break. It's kind of what, we got to step up. We got to provide services for our kupuna.
Yeah, and also I think what we need to do is we need to advocate at the societal level and the community level for changes, not just keep sending everybody who's in trouble to a parenting class, because parenting isn't the only issue. There's stressors, there's lack of opportunity, there's need to contribute to the community. So we gotta think beyond just those lower level solutions.
And as a concerned citizen, if I see somebody who's being abused, or if I know a child who's being abused, and I'm not a mandated reporter, like what some
you are.
Yeah, like some service providers are, like I am actually.
Yeah.
What are some things you think we can do as a community? Even as a mandated reporter, sometimes I thought maybe, now they have something called differential response.
Right. Not everybody gets their kids taken away, and that's important to know. Sometimes it's like, it's not that severe, but they need help, they need support, so let's get them some services and leave the children in the home. Homes are where children need to be raised.
The system has grown.
Right.
To
Absolutely.
How to better to the community.
But as to your question, I think with physical abuse, sometimes you can see somebody like losing it in a grocery store or something, and people don't know what to do. They don't know what to say. They don't want to, get slugged themselves.
Yeah.
They don't want to, embarrass somebody. But sometimes just a supportive comment to the parent, that kind of calms them down or distracts them.
Yeah.
Like, it gets pretty rough sometimes with kids, doesn't it? And to try to take their attention away from their anger at the child and to engage into an adult conversation can help.
Yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
I've done that a couple
Well,
times.
with your sense of humor, I'm sure you can.
I've walked
Yep.
past one person, I said, breathe, brother, breathe.
Yep. Yep.
No worry, I get 7.
Yeah.
Kind of small comments like that. Just so
Yeah.
that they can, it's some distraction because they're so focusing on
Right.
snapping at their kids.
And it's not disrespectful.
Yeah,
You
no,
know, you're
yeah, it's
basically
kind of fun
saying,
joke.
you and me, I know, I've been there, right? So, that's cool.
That's good. How about sex abuse? I mean, how do you, if you know somebody might be like,
Well, I think the tough thing with that is that usually the child is also conspiring with the secrecy because they feel ashamed or they're afraid what's going to happen if somebody reports and this whole ball starts
Yeah,
turning
yeah.
and they get taken out of the home and their mom's mad at them and their dad goes to jail or whatever. So it's tricky. I think it's really important for us to focus more on prevention if we can by talking to kids about
good
their
touch,
rights,
bad touch.
their rights to privacy, how they should come to grown-ups if they need help with any kind of problem,
Yeah.
not just sexual abuse, but, making yourself available.
Right.
I'm one of those grown-ups you can talk to, to say that. But if you think a child is being sexually abused, if you have evidence, I think you probably should move forward and make a report, or even call up anonymously and say to child welfare, here's what's going on. What do you think? Should I even make a report? Do I have enough to make a report?
right.
But building a relationship with that child and kind of feeling it out can also be a way, particularly if you're an auntie or you have ongoing relationship, not if you're just like,
Right.
a stranger, but
Yeah.
if you have a relationship, build that relationship,
And sometimes it's not, sometimes it's kids playing doctor, but the one kid's 10 years old, the other one's 4.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like that. And
Yeah.
I was trained, if there's a 4-year, 3-year difference, then it's a power imbalance, and thus it's, quote, could be abusive.
Well, I think the key is it could be abusive because, kids are curious. Kids
Yeah.
don't know what's what, and so if there's a weapon involved or a threat involved, I'd say, yeah, that's abuse. But sometimes kids are just like, don't let the grown-ups know, but we're checking out the whole sex thing over here. And even if there's a bit of an age difference, it still could be mutual.
Okay, so don't get all overexcited, because sometimes
and
that can be worse, getting all.
It's true. And especially if you think, oh my gosh, my 10-year-old's a sex offender. It's like, no, your 10-year-old has sexual behavior problems. You need to think about it. You need to maybe get them evaluated, but don't label them. Don't freak out.
Right, thank you for that. Wow, so I mean, we covered a lot, but under the guise of, and how are the children, these issues come up.
Yeah.
Right? Issues, and we didn't even get to talk about, children who live in poverty.
Yeah.
Right, children whose parents are having a hard time making ends meet. So.
Yeah, the whole economy
Come on
is
in,
huge.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, big, big, big. I mean, they're saying things like, all right, so parents are having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet because we live in Hawaii, right? So how can they be thinking about, all of their child's building self-esteem or whatever? They're worried about feeding them, right?
Yeah.
So it's tough, It's a hard place to
Well,
raise
I mean, kids. at least somebody's asking the question, though.
Yeah.
And we appreciate you asking the question, not just on this island, but on every island.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good, I read the book, there's a lot of good quotes that has come out of it. I'm on Carol's advisory committee, and we're so blessed to have you to do this.
Thanks.
Appreciate you.
And there's also a lot of good things going on with kids and families and a lot of good suggestions and possibilities. So we kind of talked more about the child abuse end today, but there's a strong culture here. There's a real valuing of family. There's a real valuing of children. And so we got a lot going for us, too. It's not just all the
That's true.
negative side. And I think we, generally care about each other. You help me out, I know, and hopefully someday I'll help you out, too.
Well, you've already helped me out. Thank you so much. Give me some good advice.
Okay.
Appreciate you. I appreciate you, Big Island. You guys keep watching. You guys have a good week. We love you, folks. Take care of the children. Aloha.
Aloha.